Welcome to EconomicZ101, the podcast made for Gen Z by Gen Z, bridging the gap between economics, finance, current events, and our generations, with speakers Vish, Ritam, Sinan, and myself, Mihir. Today we're talking about the Olympics. Yes, the once every 4 years event that has gone on since the 19th century. The Olympics are the culmination of sports promise and athletic virtue in our countries and the world. And what's happened recently with doping and drug use in the Olympics has brought eyes to a new discussion: the ethicality and an overlook on the rules that the Olympic pushes towards drugs. Of course, only a month ago, U.S. sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson had been eliminated from participating in the Olympics because of getting caught for marijuana usage. And this has brought a lot of debate and discourse over the fact of, are the Olympics rules on drugs and doping in general ancient, and are they aging, and whether to focus on new things for the future. To open up the conversation, bring it to anyone, we can talk about what are the Olympics general support and stance on doping.
I think obviously, as a whole, like taking these drugs and like trying to enhance like your athletic abilities through like through unethical ways, it's always like looked down upon, especially because look, the Olympics, it's a fun athletic event once every 4 years. There shouldn't really be such like a motive to cheat in this, because in the end, the if you think about it, the Olympics are promoting like international peace, world peace, and so just using ways to like gain an advantage like unfairly just doesn't help out whatsoever.
I mean, yeah, you said perfectly. The fact is, the Olympics are here to test how every single person from around the world wanted to test their skills into this sports, into this event, and they put their absolute best. So knowing that other people were using these doping methods to be more athletic and so on, it just doesn't seem fair, especially to those who wanted to try, who want to succeed.
I mean, this could be said on a lot of international sports competitions, but it seems like the Olympics is really the cream of the crop. Something so prestigious generally has strict rules on drugs in generals, like cannabinoids and substances like cannabis and marijuana, and essentially the World Anti-Doping Agency pushes rhetoric that says marijuana and drugs of that sort are strictly prohibited for competitions. Another thing that lands it on the prohibited list is a potential risk for athletes, enhancing performances, or what third of all, which brings a lot of discourse towards it, is violating the spirit of sport.
Yeah, that part is a lot of people don't really, or they're not exactly sure how to interpret that with athletes in their career, because even though athletes are obviously role models for others and they work really hard, like especially with the Olympics and everything, every athlete is always aiming for the Olympics to try and prove themselves. But then like they're not allowed to do like recreational drugs like marijuana or any other like type of drug that may not be as harmful for you, but then it's seen as a bad influence, so then they're not allowed to do it because they're seen as role models. So it's like, is that really fair to them?
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing is like a bunch of people like around the world are watching these Olympics of all ages, most like predominantly also younger audiences. So like these are role models. Literally almost every athlete in the Olympics are role models, and like little kids are looking up to them in the future. So if these athletes are exposed to like taking drugs or enhancers to get unfair advantages through the thing, then it's not really role model like, like it kind of just takes away from the whole purpose.
I mean, I can agree with you to an extent. It's concerning the type of drugs that is used. PEDs, performance enhancing drugs, should be a strict no in any form of athletic competition with that holds integrity, and the Olympics is definitely at the top of that. But I feel like marijuana is especially punished way too hard. And there has been movements over the past decades in America and in Europe focusing on the decriminalization of marijuana and cannabis. But the amount of rhetoric and propaganda that's pushed, saying that this leaf is some kind of evil drug that's going to poison the mind of the youth, is completely unwarranted, considering alcohol is a much more dangerous drug.
I mean, the thing we often forget to see is that people who like use marijuana in itself is a recreational drug, and we really shouldn't punish those who use it. We see these athletes, they go through physical stress and all of that. Sometimes they might need to use these recreational drugs to relax themselves.
I agree with that. And the thing is, they're not using it to enhance their ability to work with their sport or become stronger, become better in their field. Their own uses, whether it be for medical prescription or recreational use, it should definitely be decriminalized. And we're entering a progressive age with stuff like this is becoming more seen, and hopefully the Olympics will accept it in the future. Obviously, recreational drug use with marijuana is different from doping in regards to performance enhancing drugs. And the reality of the situation is there's many countries since the 19th century up till now, and the trend is performance enhancing drugs and doping in general has become more and more popular, and it's extremely dangerous and disappointing considering the value and importance of the Olympics on an international stage. I mean, some general rules for doping and their drug history was the fact that anything related to steroid use or anything related to PEDs would be strictly banned and would result in bans for the athletes and potentially even the countries that are participating in it.
Yeah, not only does marijuana like it helps you relax, but it really shouldn't be counted as something, or like it shouldn't be given the same punishment as a drug that's performance enhancing, because in fact marijuana actually makes athletes perform worse. So the fact that she got banned for having marijuana in her system, it she was able to be number one for trials while having it in her system. So it didn't really affect her in a good way. It just, if anything, made her worse. So
Yeah, it's kind of bizarre to me that sort of thinking, but you also have to understand the Olympic Committee and the Committee on Doping has very archaic rules when it comes to this sort of thing. Even with the legalization of marijuana in Europe and progressive ideas spreading through, the Olympics is an international committee, and hopefully we can get to a point where something like this doesn't need to be as much as an issue. And Sha'Carri Richardson, who competed in the 100-meter and 200-meter sprints and was an extremely successful sprinter, should not have to deal with stuff like that.
I mean, I heard that the reason why she used that was because of her mom dying. So you can tell that she was going through a lot of pain.
yeah, I feel like the whole conversation with like how she was doing marijuana during the trials kind of transitioned into like, should the rules be changed for athletes and how like they should be punished for the drugs that they're taking, because sometimes the drugs they're taking aren't really, or under the Olympics criteria, aren't really like performance enhancing drugs. In fact, yeah, like I said before, they just make them perform worse. So it really shouldn't be something that they're penalized for.
And I can completely agree to the fact that stuff like this has to change and rules need to become more progressive. But it's also interesting to see the Olympic Committee's decisions and rules on actual doping and performance enhancing drugs in the past. Since the late 1800s and up till now, doping has seen a massive increase in use, and especially in 2019 and before that with Russia, a massive scandal that we'll talk about a little later in the podcast. Doping has become a massive ethical and moral issue when it comes to integrity-based sports, and the history of drug doping in the Olympics is actually very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of cases in the Olympics where like we know like a bunch of people that have obviously gotten away with like a fake drug test in the past. Like for example, many of us know Lance Armstrong, where he's passed drug tests for years at a time, like during the day, and he was also cleared with this. But like eventually his teammates did sell him out and admitted to doping and said Armstrong was part of their schemes as well.
Yeah, Armstrong was not only like part of the Olympics and a great Olympian. Well, he was on drugs, but still, he was also admired by the public. He won several like of the Tour de France awards. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's also people that say like many of the top athletes in biking are like doping. So Lance Armstrong isn't really the only person at fault here. And I feel like doping, it's like it also affects the fans of the people that are involved with the sport, and it's terrible overall.
I mean, I'd lose my respect if I knew one of my favorite athletes just started doping. I mean, another example from that is Sun Yang himself, which was, I believe, a swimmer for China. He also used doping to help, what was it? Yeah, increase his overall stamina in order to swim faster.
It's definitely interesting to see because the trend of athletes like Lance Armstrong, who was a legend before the news surfaced about him, and Sun Yang, the Chinese swimmer, it's really bizarre that to maintain the top of the line and be a winner in many of these extremely grueling and intensive athletic competitions, cheating and going past like humans' natural limits is what needed to get to that top edge. And it's really disappointing concerning how we said earlier, dopings have increased over 200% since the late 1890s. Now, especially with the Russia scandal, dopings have increased so much to the fact that the Olympic Committee is getting extremely involved in checking and enhancing their ways of making sure that athletes aren't getting past their walls. And sports that are like mainly physical, like weightlifting, swimming, track, they're most likely to see these athletes doping because their physical ability is the main contingency.
Yeah, speaking of weightlifting, I'm pretty sure they actually have the highest amount of athletes that dope within their group, and like they've been caught the most for like I think at the Olympics and in general, because like weightlifting and other sports like you mentioned before, like track, swimming, all those sports where it's all just physical ability, it's so tempting for athletes to take performance enhancing drugs because all it is just grinding to get the best like physicality for your sport. So then having these performance enhancing drugs, it just makes it so much easier.
It also must be like mentally hard to like not do it, as like you see the top of your competition and the people that you constantly lose against are using it, and you know that they're using it, and it's just a difficult situation all around. I mean, in bodybuilding, like you said, for weightlifting, the entire class of competition uses it and it's extremely demoralizing to see that you need to be on gear to reach that level of performance. But if that blows your mind, just wait for Russia, man. Oh my lord. In our last decade, in the latter half of it, it wasn't just systematic. This was a state-run program to cheat in the Olympics, and it was caught out by a whistleblower in the Russia state. But we're gonna get on to the ROC and Russia scandal now.
So yeah, as Mihir said, the cream of the crop of doping, Russia. In 2019, the World Anti-Doping Agency banned Russia for 4 years after being caught with the doping scandals. Because of this, Russia was not able to compete in any sports-related convention. It wasn't even just the Olympics. Any other outside competition that related to some athletic ability internationally, they were not able to compete. But through different arguings, Putin, our Lord and Savior Putin, disagreeing with their ideas, they decided to resolve it to 2 years. And because of that, they were able to compete in this year's Olympics because of the delay of COVID.
I mean, they competed under a neutral flag, but they kept their colors or whatever. But it's a very precarious situation. I mean, to cover over the actual event that happened, it was a systematic and centralized, essentially, cover-up that benefited over 1,000 Russian athletes across over 30 different sports. Canadian law professor Richard McLaren had said when he originally published the massive report that had brought a lot of this information to blast. Essentially, this was a massive conspiracy among athletes and officials within the Russian Ministry of Sport and the FSB.
It's actually crazy. There's a documentary on Netflix called Icarus, talking about the whole situation. I think it's like 2 hours long. I saw it, I think maybe 1 or 2 years back, but it's so crazy. They even went to the stretches of like going inside the testing lab for the Olympics or something along those lines, and like switching urine samples, but because like it's insane. I don't know how they were even able to pull that off.
I mean, you can tell that it was finally uncovered when I believe the name, I'm pronouncing it wrong, definitely, but Dr. Grigory Rodchenkov decided to blow the whistleblower, and he revealed the deep web of deception and lies that Russia tried to hide when it came to doping, and because of that, that led to the eventual ban that made them not compete in the 2018 Winter Olympics.
I mean, they're not allowed to compete under the actual official Russian name now, but rather under ROC. But even in the 2022 World Cup that's going to come up for soccer, they're not allowed to compete under that. The next time, or the next official landscape for international Russian athletes to compete would be the next Olympics, actually, 2024 in Paris, I believe. I mean, it's really weird, right? Because on one hand, you have a state-run, malicious a group and a goal to cheat and try to win on an international stage. But then you also have to think of these athletes, right? These are people who have worked all their lives and are probably working every second of their day to put forward and put their best effort into winning for what they love to do. And it raises the question, and this has been debated a lot online and in professional debates, and a lot of rhetoric around this has circulated over the internet, whether the Russian athletes should even be able to compete. I mean, what do you guys think?
I mean, I think that they should, because a lot of the athletes that are part of Russia or were now representing ROC, they may not have even been involved with the whole doping scandal, because not every athlete in the sports for the Olympics needs to like dope to do well in their sport. Like, for example, like badminton, like you don't see too many doping scandals within badminton, or maybe even in like tennis or racket sports in general. You don't see too many doping scandals, yet these athletes have to face the same punishments as all of the Russian athletes. So I don't think that's really fair.
I can completely agree with that. I mean, like, despite like Russia having a whole scandal with like having their athletes doping, like a good portion of them, there's a vast majority of them that still trying equally and fairly to compete against other athletes around the world. Like, just because a small group of people, well, not really small, but a decent group, like big group amount of people were caught doing something illegal, doesn't mean everybody should be punished, right? I think that's just morally unfair on their part. Like, if you're trying to do your best, but someone else screws up on their part, like, why should you be the one that's also receiving backlash on the end of that?
I believe that the ROC, that what Russia is now trying to compete under, is actually a perfect way of doing it. They're already suffering enough, knowing that when they win a medal, they won't be hearing their Russian anthem. Instead, they'll be hearing Tchaikovsky's Piano Concerto 1, which is honestly a good piece, but it's not their national anthem.
Honestly, I might be the one to bring the bad pill here. I disagree with you. I want them to hear their Tchaikovsky's first concerto. I don't think they should be able to compete. Honestly, if you look at it, and I've seen, obviously I'm not an athlete. I am 6'4", chiseled, six-pack abs, perfect jawline, of course, but I'm not a professional athlete on an Olympic stage. And it kind of it breaks my heart to see people who spend 4 years of their lives working towards a goal only to lose to an athlete, a country at that, who is cheating in a systematic manner. I think the fact that the Russian man, missing his name, Grigory Rodchenkov, it was amazing that he finally had the courage to do that, considering the dangerous and corrupt stance of the Russian government. But this should have happened way earlier. Obviously, there are consequences that need to be had, but an athlete's integrity is more important than cheating over an entire field of people working in their own sport.
I mean, I can see your point of view, because Grigory Romachenkov, or however you pronounce it. I'm not sure if I said it right, but he was actually the one who helped orchestrate these athletes getting these performance enhancing drugs. So even though he sold everyone out, he was the one who was doing everything, and also all of these athletes were in on it. So I can see how you think that, okay, they deserve this, like this is terrible, like, and it's justified. But no, even though all these athletes knew about it and the person who even sold them out was like part of it, a lot of athletes didn't want to be a part of it, even though they knew about it and they were trying to like be honest athletes. And I don't think they should all face the same punishment.
I can agree with that because at the same time, like, Mihir was saying everyone was in on it. Everyone in Russia had some sort of idea of what was going on. And obviously, not necessarily everybody was for this idea, right? We still have these genuine athletes that are still trying their hardest through ethical means to like win properly or do properly in their sports. But then the thing is, if they were to rat out their own country, right, then it would like in any case, the whole country would be negatively affected, right? Like I know just because there's some good people and there's some bad people, in the grand scheme of things, the Russia as a whole would get punished in itself because when the Olympics or any other sporting things like see or know that like Russia has been taking part in these illegal dopings, then they know everyone is going to get punished. So I think they just had to resort to staying silent about it until they were eventually the other like people that were doping were like caught.
I mean, I feel like it's kind of naive saying that. I think the major issue would be the actual fear and the pressure from the Russian government keeping their athletes silent. But also, I can understand partly your point of view saying that they're trying to keep their country in check. But look what happened, right? The scandal came up. This was an institutionalized, state-run cheating scandal. Something was going to happen, and I think it should have happened sooner. But I mean, obviously, I disagree with the three of you on this, but what do you think this says about the history of doping in the Olympics? Do you think in general there should be stricter punishments for doping to try to make sure stuff like this doesn't happen ever again?
So like as you say that, like I think definitely stricter like rules should be implemented in this. However, not necessarily harsher punishments. I think more of having like different standards. For example, I know we talked about how marijuana can be used. Like it's a medicinal drug. Like it's not an enhancer drug. So there should be specific rules for like things like marijuana that like some athletes might need. And then maybe have stricter punishments for drugs that do enhance or have athletes be like doping themselves.
I think it's very clear when we all agree with this. When it comes to doping, stricter punishments are absolutely key. And because of that, I think the Olympics and other sports events would be a lot more safer than it is.
No, yeah, the issue is how the Olympic Committee is supposed to create stricter regulations, because it's pretty easy to cheat a drug test. Like as you've seen in the past, like Lance Armstrong, for example, we were talking about him before. He cheated drug tests for years and he took multiple in a day at times. Like it was insane. And people had no idea until somebody from his team admitted to him doing it. So it's really hard for the Olympic Committee to find like a foolproof way to make sure that these athletes aren't doping. So that's the real issue here.
I mean, I'd like to disagree because, as I've said, I'm a bodybuilder. I've cheated many doping tests before, and the fact of the matter is, okay, all jokes aside, it is really weird. Like you said, with the Olympic Committee, there's so many protocols that they have to go through, so many committees that they have to pass decisions through to even make a change. I mean, the last rule change that they had was after the Russian incident, and before that it was years and years, man. It's really crazy to get that type of consensus of the entire Olympic Committee and get that type of majority.
Yeah, so as like I'm saying this, I know I'm holding back from here's DoorDash order right now. But anyways, yeah, so definitely there should be some rule changes within the Olympics and other sporting activities that that might punish athletes that use illegal means of doping and other substances to enhance their athletic abilities. They should definitely be punished to a stronger extent. At the same time, taking into account that some drugs like marijuana might be like, which is used for recreational purposes, should not be penalized. Those people that have to use those or might use those.
While I agree with your sentiments regarding doping in the Olympics, I don't take lightly to you insulting my chiseled physique and my hardened exterior. I mean, I'll keep back for that from now. Today, we've had a good discussion, starting with Shikari Richardson's marijuana usage and continuing on to the history of the Olympics. We've learned that I'm an aesthetic man, and everyone else on the show has their eye out and wants my downfall.
Right.
All jokes aside, thank you guys for listening once again. This is our 7th installment, and our next one will be dropping in a few days. It's been really interesting. I mean, right now the U.S. is second to Japan in the medal count for the Olympics. Hopefully, we'll see them on top by the time the Olympics end. But we'll keep y'all updated with how the podcast is gonna go. Again, thank you for coming today. It's been Mahir, and we'll see you later. Goodbye.
See ya.
Bye, everyone.